Very good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you, Anu. Thank you, Peter, for your valuable insights on. Are you able to hear me okay? Perfect. And I'm going to change gears here and bring you an exciting panel discussion here. But before I start, let me tell you a short story. So my 30-year-old daughter has been telling me about this ChatGPT app for quite some time. And I thought I'll give it a try this morning. So I asked ChatGPT, I said, give me a 4-line poem on smart buildings and sustainability. And here is what I got. Amidst concrete and steel, a vision takes flight. Smart buildings arise, embracing green light. Sustainability's dance, a harmonious sight. Nature and tech unite, in brilliance alight. I was like, I have to give it to ChatGPT because this is the exact topic of panel discussion we are going to do today. Because sustainability and smart buildings go very much hand in hand. And with IoT, with smart sensors, and with digital insights, these buildings transform, but not only transform, they optimize, they reduce energy, reduce waste, and deliver much cleaner carbon footprint, right? With that thought in mind, let's get started with this exciting panel discussion. First of all, Richard and Steve, Jamie, thank you very much for being with us this morning. It's a pleasure having you here. So in the interest of broader audience, my first question is very simple. You know, if you can introduce your organizations and then how you are looking at vision of net zero in your organizations, that would be a great start, and then we go from there. Richard, maybe you want to start first.
I work with a company called Lendlease, which is a global property sort of developer, asset manager, and we actually have a construction arm as well. Very interested in the topic of smart cities. We have a very large global development pipeline. It's 120 billion. So in the context, maybe for those in Singapore, we've recently completed the Paine quarter development, which was 3.5 billion. So we've got 120 billion out there in the greater ether, so a very big interest in technology and sustainability. We have our own very aggressive sustainability goals, net zero by 2025, absolute zero by 2040. Always makes me a bit scared when I say that, but there's a lot of work to do. Anyway, I'll pass to Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm Anne, Business Development Director at WiredScore. WiredScore, for those of you who are not familiar with us, we are the global rating agency for connected and smart buildings. So in other words, we set the global standards for technology in a built environment. Think about us as like the USGBC behind LEED or IWBI behind WELL. WiredScore is the organization behind two certification schemes, WiredScore for digital connectivity and SmartScore for smart buildings. So globally, we certified close to 4,000 buildings, of which 10% of those are certified under our SmartScore scheme. So really delighted to be here and share more about my thoughts about how we weigh into the ESG conversation.
Thank you, Anne. Steve.
Hi, everyone. So Beca is an engineering consultancy firm. Within the buildings market, we're hired by developers and operators like Lendlease to help them plan, design, and manage the construction of their building assets. Traditionally, the firm's been around for 100 years, so traditionally, you know, we did civil and structure and building services, which are close to my heart, but increasingly we're advising now around sustainability and building digital systems. The reason we're particularly interested in building digital systems is trying to get the levels of energy efficiency that we need to get. You know, a few years ago, we'd have a Green Mark Platinum building, we'd save 30% in energy, and we'd be patting ourselves on the back about how awesome that was. And then you realize if you want net zero, you've got to be up at 50, 60%, and the old ways won't do. And we're really excited about the potential of building digital systems to make some significant savings to help us get to the very high levels of performance we're going to need to get if we're going to save our planet.
Thank you, Steve.
So I'm Jamie, I'm with CBRE. So as a global real estate services organisation, we're helping clients across the entire life cycle of their property journey. And over the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen ESG and sustainability really grow and expand its services. And we've seen that really be integrated into each of those stages. So CBRE is now supporting our clients at development throughout the occupation through to disposals of their assets and really supporting them to deliver their net zero or entire ESG journeys and targets. And that will continue to grow. And in Southeast Asia particularly, that's skyrocketing in terms of the focus of ESG from organizations.
Thank you, Jamie. I want to start very quickly around what is driving this ESG and sustainability agenda today when you converse with your customers, right? So is it because, you know, they are pressurized by the regulatory obligations, ESG reporting is a must? Is it because carbon tax is becoming more and more higher, you know, energy cost is going high, you have to look at, how do I look at OPEX costs? So what is driving your conversations with your customers? And I'll come back to 2025 goal that Lendlease has, very interesting there. But maybe we start with trends first, if that's okay. Steve or Richard, anyone you want to take a first bite on this? Steve, maybe what is driving from your perspective when you speak to?
It's our clients, right? So our clients realize, and primarily I do commercial buildings, so I'll talk from a commercial building perspective.
Absolutely.
Our clients realize that their tenants need to move into a building with a level of sustainability that's consistent with their own objectives. They've all got set their own high sustainability targets. They cannot move into a building that is much lower, right? It makes them hypocrites. And they realize that they need to find something like a net zero building that matches their own goals as an organization. And so I think that very progressive developers, unfortunately not everyone, but the people who really understand and see the future, set very high targets and come to us and say, we need to be up here because otherwise we're going to go to the marketplace with a commercial building and we're not going to have any tenants. People are going to say, no, this doesn't fit for me. So that's what's driving it for us, is finding a way to hit the high targets that our developer clients know that their tenants want.
Super high targets. Richard, you want to add to it?
Yeah, I think from Lendlease's point of view, we had our original founding chairman made some comments about the balancing of financial profits, looking after the community and the sort of economic sort of outcomes broader for everyone. And I think it's sort of been within the DNA of our organisation, and for us it's it's a licence to operate, is to think about development in a sustainable way, that you're not leaving people behind and that you're providing a leadership role going forward in the industry. And that really motivates our staff to work as hard as we can, and we're very keen to work collaboratively with other like-minded organisations, because increasingly you realise you can't do it yourself. You need to have really good strategic partners to take you on the journey. And I'm excited by the fact that you don't have all the answers. You've got the problem statement, you've got some very ambitious goals out there, and it's sort of motivating going on the path, collaborating with smart individuals to get there. So yeah, that's probably a Lendlease view.
No, that's really great, and it's all about taking the small baby steps together, thinking the vision together, and then going, how do we achieve it? And from your perspective, especially on the brownfield buildings, I know because for Steve and Lendlease, basically, it's all about new developments, a lot about new developments. But what about brownfield buildings? How are your customers starting these conversations today, and what's driving their agenda?
Yeah, so how we lean into this whole ESG conversation is around the fourth pillar that's coming up, called resiliency. Because ultimately, resiliency, we look at really future-proofing a building, protection of buildings against cyber attacks, and really against, I guess, climate changes. So it's really referenced by World Economic Forum, JP Morgan, and the likes of those, right? So in terms like the brownfield development, it's really having the usefulness of a global standard to be able to benchmark the existing building's performance to what does the best-in-class looks like from a technology standpoint, and therefore helping them along the gaps identification and then guiding them through the targeted improvement works. Because essentially we recognize that 80% of the buildings that's going to exist in 2050 are already built today. So essentially the buildings we're occupying will need to serve us for the next 20, 25 years. So therefore, noting that new developments will be sort of spearheading that whole development path, what the best global best standards look like, but we bring on the older buildings onto the next phase of life, helping them to be a retrofit, retro-green their buildings in order to bring them to the next phase of their development, their cycle.
This is super, because as you said, 80% of the existing buildings will still be there in 2050. So how do we optimize it, right? So This is super. Jamie, you want to add any comments from CBRE perspective? What's driving in your conversations with your customers today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've hit on a couple here, and one of them is the commitments of global organisations that have said they're going to achieve net zero. And Lendlease, for example, committing to 2025, and a lot of occupiers committing to net zero by 2030, particularly within scope 1 and 2 emissions. So that means that the energy used in their buildings has to be net zero in the next 7 years. That gives 1 or 2 lease cycles. And so a lot of businesses are now starting to realise that they don't have that long to make significant changes within their building to support their targets. And alongside that, there's the financial benefits or repercussions as well. Improving your buildings, reducing your consumption, has a significant benefit in terms of cost. So it makes sense. And in terms of your building attractiveness for landlords, you're not able to tenant your buildings or lease your buildings out. You're not able to sell your buildings if they're not considered green, or in Singapore if they don't have a certification. So we're seeing a huge uptake in building certifications to enable that as well. And then I suppose finally, which we haven't touched on, I guess it's just the right thing to do. We're in trouble, so
Great
being able to
point.
do that.
Great point there. And I think the point that you were making just now, right? So if I take an old building, if I make it IoT, if I make it green, will the value of that building now goes up? Can we measure that green building with a higher valuation price, right? So that's the future that we were looking forward to, right? If I want to, so we have a net zero goal in mind now. We know we want to achieve net zero in 2025, 2030. In Singapore, we're committing to 2050. Soon we realize there are tons of challenges, right? And then Greenfield have its own plate of challenges. Brownfield have its own plate of challenges. Richard, and maybe you want to start with what is the challenges today looks like, right, when you start your journey?
Well, I think just bringing it local, organisations like Lendlease have global ambitions, but they have to be locally executed. And the massive challenge in Singapore is the greening of the grid, as people in the audience may be aware. I mean, the availability of renewables, be there PV, there's no wind here, probably going to max out at about 10%. So where are you going to green the grid so that you can actually get a green supply of power on the basis that you would electrify your building? So that's the number one challenge, and maybe later in the panel we'll talk about some of the options there, but that's the one that worries me. You know, it's obviously an issue that the Singapore government's sort of dealing with. Will it be green hydrogen? Will it be some cables coming from offshore and PV offshore? But that'll be the really important thing, because in the interim we're buying renewable energy certificates for carbon offsets, etc. Yep.
I think great point, Richard, there. And in Singapore, as we know, we're driving towards super low energy buildings. So the goal is, how do I optimize the building to 80% from 2005 levels? So once I bring the building to super low energy building, then I will add a renewable to make it net zero, right? So with limited space, that's the best option to look at, right? So let's optimize it to the best level first. Steve, you want to add to this? You know, what are some of the challenges you are seeing in this industry?
Yeah, because we have to move so far, right? We have to do things that we often haven't done before, and that's quite scary for some people in a project team. It's a bit alarming, and so there's a couple of things you can do. One is project clients and things setting the culture right and saying, we're going to do a whole lot of scary stuff, we're going to do some new stuff, we're going to do a few things that we'll try and won't work, and we'll do a few things that'll be spectacular, and that's okay. It's all a bit unpredictable, but we've got to reach out and do it. And so that culture setting is super important. I think also what's super helpful is consulting quite widely and getting buy-in. I find that we tend to get in a little design group and we do things, and then the first time that the facilities team finds out about these things, or others, is sort of kind of once we're building or we're finishing it. And, you know, socializing and talking about it and getting everybody's input at the beginning helps, because you do new things. Sometimes they have issues. If everybody's on the same page, everybody wants it, everyone was asked, everybody comes together and makes it work. If you didn't ask anyone and just said, oh, you just use this, and then it doesn't work, people are going to just cross their arms and go, you give me this thing and it's not right for me, and I'm going to criticize it. But if I was part of the solution at the beginning, where I was part of ideation, I was contributing, I feel that people care, when I get this new thing and it needs some tuning, I'm all in because I'm part of the solution. So that culture and that broad involvement of the whole team is the secret to making new, complex, unproven things work.
This is great, and this emphasizes the point Anu was making earlier, that we cannot solve this problem alone. It's a partner game, and we all have to come together to solve this problem, right? But from brownfield perspective, I'm sure both CBRE and WiredScore must be seeing very different challenges, right? Because the building already exists, there's lots already there. How do you start?
So, with regards to the risk, I think the biggest risk that all the sort of older buildings or older building stock face is technological obsolescence. Because as many, we recognize, again, I mentioned the statistics, they were built 10, 20, 30 years ago without technology in mind. So now as we struggling to keep pace with obviously the new developments, the new retrofitted buildings, and what that looks like. But I guess the risk there also brings about certain challenges. So how do you go about implementation? What do you need? What are the necessary steps? What do you need to get in place in order to make sure that you're retrofitting your building, you're upgrading your digital infrastructure, as you're thinking through your AEI works on your building? What are the things, what are the measures, what are the standards you need to look out for in terms to then get the buildings up to scratch, from scratch to speed, So I think that is really recognizing the risk and the challenges around facing sort of the brownfield projects.
That's great. And I want to touch a little bit on that. So you mentioned about standards. Is there a global standard that, if I want to start into ESG and net zero journey, what should be my North Star goal that you advise to your customers today?
I will actually defer to Jamie as the key expert on sort of the net zero, but I guess we recognize there are many different standards there and all achieving sort of different outcomes and objectives. Around, I guess, the sort of preoccupation around sort of adoption of technology, we have a number out there in terms of your ISO for smart buildings, your International Building Code, your USGBC LEED, you have your BCA Green Mark, and all those things weigh into this helping clients improve their buildings. Of course, this WiredScore. I mentioned at the beginning why standards are important, why having a global framework is useful. So I guess in that way, we really land to the whole conversation of what that looks like, what the good, excellent, or exceptional looks like, and how to sort of guide the improvement works there.
Super. Jimmy, you want to add to this point that Anne was making just now?
Yeah, and I think it hits on all of the points that we've been discussed here as well, of understanding what to do, understanding what to implement, and what that actual target is. So recently, CREM, the Carbon Risk Real Estate Monitor, who have been working with Science Based Target Initiative and GRESB and other industry frameworks, have developed targets and decarbonisation pathways for assets, different assets in different countries for different science-based pathway reductions. And so it's really important that all organisations are supporting the reduction of their buildings and their consumption in their assets along those pathways, because really those pathways have been developed to enable the delivery of net zero at a global scale through the implementation at a country level. So those are really important standards that we're looking to follow.
Super, super. Thank you, Jamie, for that. And I think I want to touch a little bit on that technology point that you were making, and the role of technology, right? So when we set the goals, when we had the driver, we know the challenges. What is the role of technology in achieving net zero target or net zero vision that we have, right? So maybe I'll start with Richard first. So 2025 is a very aggressive goal. What are some of the technologies that you're looking at? How technology is going to help you achieve those goals? If you have some examples to share, that would be great, Richard.
Well, it's obviously measurement. I think the challenge for us is when you sort of got multiple buildings with multiple different systems. How do you bring all that together on one platform? And actually, we get a lot of companies coming to us in recent times saying, we've got this fantastic platform for measuring your carbon output. And we look at it and go, it's really good, but we've got so much diversity across our business that can we change from our inherent system that we've had? And we've gone with we're a very early measurer and adopter of measuring carbon on buildings, and we're so embedded, I guess, with that system now that jumping across to another system is actually a big challenge in itself. But that's what we're grappling with at the moment is do we make a massive change, get into a newer platform, or not stay with our existing one?
I hope it's a Johnson control system. So we'll talk about it. But thank you, Richard. Jamie, you want to add a little bit here, the role of technology and then some of the areas that you are seeing in technology trends in your world from FM perspective?
Yeah, I think the first thing about technology is gaining visibility. It's about understanding what's happening in, for example, the built environment in your buildings and how you can leverage that insight and turn it into action. So one of the big areas that we're seeing within the built environment at the moment is the adoption of smart building technologies that might give you a bit more visibility over the plant and what's happening there. And it gives the FM team, the facilities management team, that understanding to make data-driven actions within that building to really reduce energy consumption and reduce carbon as well. And then comes the reporting point as well, but it's really about gaining insight through technology so we can understand what's going on.
Steve, yeah, I know you. This is the question now. You are eager to answer.
I just wanted to just say how much I support that. Data analytics and these fault detection systems have so much potential upside. We build all these buildings. People like me, we put 10,000 data points in them. We make it incredibly fantastic and complicated, and then we hire 2 or 3 people and go, off you go, make sure it works, make sure it's optimal, and deal with all of these other things at the same time. And I think, it's unreasonable. We expect fallible human beings somehow to be robots and then scold them when they don't do it. And technology's got such a good opportunity to help people do fantastic jobs. We only do this in buildings because we think it's not mission critical. We don't do this in planes. We don't go and say, pilots, just fly the plane and make sure the engines are running properly and make sure everything's working great. We wouldn't do that to them. We'd put a whole lot of systems in that are checking, and they let you go where you want to go, and every now and then they say, hey, pay attention to this thing doesn't look right. But on buildings, somehow we think people are God somehow and they know everything. So putting technology in to help people, it's not replacing people, it's being a great assistant to allow them to do their job very well and be more effective. And I think there's so much upside to make fallible human beings do better in complex roles.
This is great. And then I like that point where you were saying technology to help the people, right? Not to replace the people. So again, great point there. And I know from WireScore perspective, you will be seeing tons and tons of technologies out there because, the moment you go into digital building accreditations, whether it's SmartScore or WireScore, can you give some examples, what kind of technologies in action you are seeing? Is it, AI, robotics, platforms, visualization, and how is all things coming together in your world?
Before I answer that, I want to acknowledge Richard's point around the challenges or difficulties with measurement. I think that's where technology really plays a crucial role because you can't have a sustainable building without some form of technology in it. Because at a very basic level, you need to be able to measure energy consumption, high level to be able to optimize building performance. So technology then forms the systems, the backbones, the way and means to be able to track and measure sort of those data points and therefore lend into the whole sustainability KPI reporting, which is what's driving the agenda for today. Having said that, is a common misconception about WireScore as a technology player prescribing certain types of hardware, software, or technology solutions. I think we sit in a very unique position whereby with the global lens that we have over technology, we're not saying that you need to go out and buy this piece of software or you need to buy this particular hardware from this organization, but we're saying that what outcomes are you trying to enable with technology adoption to enable you to meet your sustainability goals. So what we as a certification body, we're very outcome driven. In other words, it's not about tech for tech's sake, but it's really about sort of the outcomes that technology can drive towards be it on a connectivity standpoint or from a smart enabledness standpoint.
And that's super. Do you want to touch about the role of AI technology, right? I know this is something Steve and myself, we were talking about a lot on the role of AI. And then how does AI comes together, making it whole autonomous part of it, right? So we don't just hire 2-3 people and then we tell them, hey, go solve the problem, but do this 10 things other as well. From your perspective, are you seeing any trends in action today, or customers who are asking this kind of information? How is buildings going to go autonomous in future? Either of you, maybe. You want to take?
I'll take a stab at it and I'll pass it to Steve. There's a lot of buzzword, I guess, about AI in our industry, but the reality of that is that AI has been around for a really long time. I guess Richard would know on his buildings, a lot of developers are sort of driving the AI-powered solutions to be able to measure data across their whole building portfolio, predominantly from the lens of like optimizing building performance, but also mainly with focus on sort of reducing energy consumption. So I think one of the examples we can give here is really about predictive maintenance versus a traditional way of preventive maintenance. So this is one example we see. But I guess the next frontier of what we observe from our standpoint about AI is the generative AI. You referenced at the very beginning about ChatGPT. I guess my understanding of generative AI from my own little course on that, really simply the ability to create new content, but we're vastly different from the old traditional AI. So when you think about your imaging, your audio, your text, which is a very powerful way of transforming industries. And I think you think about the industry use case for real estate in our industry, for example, like architects adopting AI, generative AI, to be able to quickly generate drawings, or by city planning or development, really helping with the sort of like site visibility of that. So I think that to us is really going to be transformative. We're very excited about the future of like generative AI.
So digital transformation is what I'm hearing, and then moving from usual preventive to predictive maintenance, and then where technology can really help drive seeing some immediate results. Steve, I know you have some points to add here.
You're not going to like this. Massive potential upside using machine learning and other AI tools, but we're not there yet. And I get a little bit cross with the industry putting the words AI into everything they describe, and I think that can put people off a bit. And I think the solutions we have right now, a lot of which are simple rule-based solutions, simple algorithms that say, hey, if there's not a lot of people in the building, why is the fresh air still open and using so much energy? You should look at that. Those things are amazing. And we see projects where people do simple rules-based analytics oversight, and they have huge outcomes. And I think sometimes we could be a bit more honest and straightforward. And just say, this is what we have right now, and this is what's coming, and we're working really hard on it. But guess what? What we have right now works great. Because I think sometimes using those words actually doesn't get people on board. I think sometimes it scares them off, and they needn't be scared off because we have great solutions that are relatively easy to understand. And so I think, yeah.
I'm a big believer of that as well. So to me, domain and digital go hand in hand, right? So one can say, I can have a great AI algorithm, but I don't have any domain knowledge. How does the chiller works? How does BMS works? Basic things, right? If I can't control the AHU, if I don't know the example that you were saying, there are 100 people in this area, 1,000 people in this area right now. Do I need more fresh air? If I can't connect domain and digital together, we won't be seeing any results. It's just a show storytelling results, right? So that's where the point you're coming towards. I want to move a gear here and then go towards energy efficient buildings. And I know Lendlease is moving hard in that direction, and Singtel building or many other buildings are going to be net zero or super low energy buildings. And when we talk about energy efficiency, can you give some ideas, Richard? How do you get started? What are the challenges that you're seeing in energy efficient buildings? And then how does it all connect to the net zero vision that we have, right?
I think to date we've been working through fairly methodically on an incremental gains process of working out where your maximum energy demand is. How do you make that more efficient? That points you always to air conditioning systems and the like, and lighting systems and stuff like that. But maybe just to pick up a few of the points that were just raised, I think, with Anne and Steve, on the control and the iterative control systems. I mean, and maybe to bring it home, we recently all enjoyed a public holiday on Friday. It would have been nice if the building systems would sort of throw up this little cue to you and say, Friday's going to be a public holiday. Do you want to run the building as normal, or do you want to do something different with the building? And I would imagine that every building on Friday probably just ran as normal. And that's an incredible waste of energy. And then if you think about a normal workday now, post-COVID, most offices probably are fairly vacant Mondays, probably Fridays, and a bit of a peak on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Are the buildings still operating identically Monday through Friday? Again, can the system say to you, listen, this is how your occupancy is running. Can we suggest maybe we'll just turn the chillers on a little bit later this day, or shut them down a little bit earlier on another day? And it's these little nudges and recommendations that are going to make the massive gains in the future. Because it's all there. The systems are all there. It's just, as Steve was saying earlier, it's getting computer algorithms to throw up recommendations, analyse, predict, recommend, and make it easy for people to make the big gains. So I think that's where the next wave really will be. And, you know, hopefully the incremental gains that we've been looking at, this one will give us another big step change.
This is great, Richard. And then I think digital insights, as I was talking earlier, right, is all about, you know, making right decisions. If technology is there, it should be helping making you right decisions, right? I want to jump quickly to Jamie here, right? So Jamie, from CBRE's point of view and energy efficient buildings, what are you seeing, you know, and your conversations with customers today?
Yeah, I think it's all about efficiency, especially in places like Singapore, as we've said. We've got to reduce consumption because we can't necessarily rely on the grid to deliver renewable energy. So everyone is pushing towards energy efficiency, and technology definitely is something that people are looking to do. I think one of the challenges around implementing that technology is finding the right time to do it. We have 80% of the buildings that are in place until 2050, or will be in place in 2050. So those buildings have old technology in, and it's going to be expensive to replace that. So when do we do that while also minimizing disruption to tenants? Because ultimately they're the most important part of that building. I think the one point that we maybe haven't discussed as much is the people in the building. And that's another thing that really needs to be tackled in a, maybe not the best word for it in terms of the people, but considering how people are using that building, how we can change the behavior of the people to ensure that they are considering energy efficiency. And that might be not turning air conditioning down to 20 degrees because they want it to be extra cold today, or making sure that things are turned off on the weekdays, but then also having that balance and making sure that people want to come into the space. We say that people don't want to come into the office, or aren't coming into the offices on a Monday or a Friday. How can we make sure that offices particularly are still an attractive place for people to be in while maintaining a good comfort level without using too much energy? And it's a real challenge because ultimately being comfortable means more energy, which means more cost and more carbon.
So mindset change, right? So what it nearly needs is it's people, process, and technology all coming together to solve the problem, right? So it definitely needs a big mindset shift where you're coming from, right? I think I want to connect the dots to the white paper launch and what Anu and Peter were mentioning earlier, and talk about Singapore, right? So Singapore, we have a net zero goal of 2050. We have a very strategic goal of 2030 of reducing scope 1, scope 2 by 50%. If maybe Anne, you can share some insights from, or maybe Jamie here to start with, what are some of the things Singapore is doing to achieve these goals by 2030?
I mean, from the built environment point of view, the big focus is building certifications. So the work that the government has done with the BCA to introduce Green Mark, and then the uptake of the Green Mark across the built environment is really a first step in ensuring that the buildings that are present in Singapore are as efficient as possible and as high quality as possible. Beyond that, it then goes into making sure that the funds are available, or the incentives are available for organisations to invest into green technology. So considering how they can invest in energy efficient technology, water management, waste management, which really will support them in pushing towards that net zero target. But because without incentives, companies struggle to do it quite often. And the other thing that Singapore's really now looking at is the legislation part of it. So they've got the benefits for the organisations, but now it's also the repercussions if you don't do it. And more legislation will be coming in over the next couple of years to ensure that companies are focusing on net zero and decarbonisation. And so that's going to be a big driver for companies to get towards net zero.
Super. Steve, you want to build on this or add your thoughts here?
So I said before, we have to make some big changes and we have to adopt some new technologies which they're not all globally new, but they're new in Singapore. And in order to get people comfortable, we're really encouraging our clients to go and talk to other people and go see. Most projects now we're doing study tours, we're going out visiting. You very kindly connected me with some of your thought leaders in Milwaukee when I was in the States last year. Just talking to them and hearing, oh, that isn't that new. We've been doing this over here. Awesome. Can we go meet? And so I think going out and going around the world and seeing what people are doing, it also lowers concern. I think there's one thing for a consultant to say, this is amazing, you should do it. It's much better for an operations manager to talk to his peer, somebody he respects who does the same job as him, who says, we've done this for a year and it works and it's fantastic. So a long-winded way of saying we should get out and travel, talk to lots of smart people. It's a lot less scary. You get a lot better buy-in, and that way we can make the big changes we need to in Singapore.
This is super. And maybe, sorry, Anne, you want to add something to this?
I mean, I couldn't have said it better than Jamie in terms of the initiatives, and obviously Steve highlighted the public-private partnership type of collaboration which is necessary to move. I only add a light touch around, I guess Singapore as a government is very proactive in this space, really making huge strides. We have the whole Smart Nation strategy or approach. We have like the sort of green master plan, the 80-80-80 by 2030. All these are really good sort of initiatives put in place. But I really want to, I guess, commend or recommend that the Singapore government has really taken a very big stride and having the vision to sort of push all those initiatives and obviously driving towards the net zero agenda.
Perfect. And then I was about to talk about 80-80-80 because those who don't know, 80-80-80 is a Singapore Green Plan for 2030. What it means is that 80% new developments will be super low energy buildings, 80% of the existing buildings will be platinum green, and 80% energy efficiency from 2005 levels, right? So that's 80-80-80 that we have in Singapore. I want to maybe, one last closing thoughts here from everyone. So for those of us who are here, who are looking to start their ESG, sustainability, net zero journey, how do we get started? And then, some closing comments from each of you, that will be fantastic.
Well, if you're just starting your journey, I mean, I think upskilling yourself on the terminology, I'll fairly admit there's a lot of terminology out there that I struggle with sometimes. What I tend to do is listen to a lot of podcasts about sustainability, about the terminology, about different ways of decarbonising. And I think for the managers out there, you've got to make some tough decisions in the future that requires some big picture thinking, and you need to educate yourself. So find ways of getting information from different sources so that you'll be ready to make those good decisions in the future.
I guess the future of the built environment is smart. So identifying, deploying technologies which are A, appropriate to the buildings and cities' ambitions, and then B, really having the global standards to benchmark and therefore scale at speed. So 3 key takeaways from me. I guess 1, global standards are useful. I guess that's why you have many of those out there, really forming a sort of guide, a compass towards this whole net zero agenda. Second thing is getting the basics right. In other words, in order to start on this whole digital transformation journey, really making sure your digital infrastructure is sound. And the last thing is, which we are here today, and that's why all of us are here, really having the industry-wide education, sharing is so important, obviously having a shared vision and goal to strive towards that whole net zero agenda.
Great points, Anne. Steve, any closing comments from you?
Just reiterating that culture thing, just accepting that this is really hard and we're going to have to do really new things, and some things will work and some things will have challenges, and we accept that, embrace it, and then we will get there. If we're all risk averse and stand back and we're all trying to push the risk cube around amongst us, it won't work. So if we all come to it understanding it's hard, accepting that we might have setbacks, but we'll get there ultimately, then we will succeed.
I like it. Don't be afraid of failing, right? So fail fast, learn fast.
Can I just add, we're doing a new technology for Richard on a project, and we were like, the results are going to be somewhere between here and here, and we met with BCA and said, I'm a bit nervous about this because I'm an engineer, not a fortune teller, and so if things aren't exactly it, what's going to happen? Are you guys going to scold us and we're going to have trouble? And they said, look, if we did that, no one is going to do any innovation ever, right? If somebody tried to do something and then they got whacked by the regulator, everyone's going to hold back. And they're like, that's the last thing we would do. If you have challenges, we'll be there, we'll be supportive, we'll do everything we can, we'll give you all the leeway because this is what we want. This is what we really need. We need people to take a chance, and we'll work and we'll support. And I found that extremely refreshing to get that message that we're with you, we understand, we're going to accommodate you, and we want to support people doing new things. So refreshing.
Thank you, Steve. Jamie, any last closing comments here?
I think the first thing, if you're starting out as well, is understand where you are, whether that's your emissions and your baseline or what's actually happening within your organization. It's really important, and it's actually slightly easier than you might think, just to understand the basics there. But then it's really understanding where you want to get to. Is it 2040 net zero? Do you want to focus on benefiting your employees? Is there a different focus to your ESG journey? And I think thirdly, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's a very complex subject, and it's very difficult to really get a clear understanding of how you're going to be getting from where you are now to where you want to be. And there are organisations like CBRE, there are industrial standards like PREM, as I mentioned earlier, that are there to help and there to provide best practice. And so as an organisation, it's always good to bring in experts and support to really get you along that journey.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you. I want to conclude the panel discussion with some thoughts that came out of this discussion, right? So people, process, technology, domain plus digital is important. Technology should be there to help the person, goal in mind. I think those are fantastic comments. Richard talked about energy efficiency building 2025. I love that goal. And I want to open up the floor here. If there are any questions for our panelists from the audience here. If there are no questions, I would like to thank you, Richard and Steve and Jamie. Thank you very much for your time. Pleasure having you and having this interesting panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
You did fantastic. As always, thank you. Jamie, thank you.